Chapter 4 and Song 4 Summary. Philosophy asserts that human reason cannot attain God's simple foreknowledge, and for that reason, Boethius is confused by the contradiction between foreknowledge and free will. She will now unravel his difficulties and then help him grasp the simplicity of God's foreknowledge. If some events do not occur out of necessity, then the contradiction between foreknowledge and free will is resolved. For example, there are actions that unfold before our eyes that are not compelled by outward necessity, such as skilled chariot-driving. Just as our knowledge does not compel events to happen as we watch them, so God's perfect knowledge does not compel future events to happen as He watches them. But can events that by their nature are not certain to occur be foreknown? Yes, because whether an event is necessary or not does not affect God's foreknowledge of it, since knowledge is based on the nature of the knower, not the nature of the event. Philosophy illustrates this with the nature of man. The physical senses, the imagination, the reason, and the understanding grasp man's nature in different ways, the understanding being the highest of all with the purest and most perfect insight. The knowledge of man these faculties gain is based on the nature of these faculties, not on the nature of man. Chapter 4. Then she replied, "This debate about providence has raged for countless years. Cicero vigorously discusses it in his work On Divination. You also have long and earnestly pondered the problem, yet no one has persevered diligently enough to solve it. And the reason for this blindness is that the movement of human reasoning cannot cope with the simplicity of divine foreknowledge. If it could understand this simplicity in any way, no shadow of uncertainty would remain. I will soon try to make this clear and plain to you after I consider the arguments that have swayed you. First, I want to know why the solution some have proposed dissatisfies you. If foreknowledge is not the reason future events are necessary, foreknowledge would not be considered any hindrance to the freedom of the will. Now, surely, the sole ground on which you argue the necessity of the future is that foreknown things cannot fail to come to pass. But if, as you were ready to acknowledge just now, the fact of foreknowledge imposes no necessity on future things, what reason would we have to suppose that a voluntary action can have only one possible outcome? Suppose, for the sake of argument, and to see what follows, we assume that there is no foreknowledge. Are willed actions, then, tied down to any necessity in this case? Certainly not. Let us assume foreknowledge again, but say that it does not impose any actual necessity on anything. The freedom of the will, I imagine, will remain in complete integrity, but you will argue that even though the foreknowledge does not impose necessity on the future event, yet it signals that it will necessarily happen. Granted, but in this case, it is plain that even if there had been no foreknowledge, the result would have been inevitably certain. For a sign only indicates something that exists, it does not bring to pass what it represents. We must show beforehand that all things, without exception, happen of necessity, in order that foreknowledge may be a sign of this necessity. Otherwise, if no such universal necessity exists, foreknowledge cannot be a sign of a non-existent necessity. Also, it is obvious that a proof, established on firm grounds of reason, must be drawn not from signs and arguments from the outside, but from suitable and necessary causes. But how can things foreseen ever fail to come to pass? Why, this would have us believe that the events Providence foresees coming were not about to happen, instead of supposing that, although they come to pass, nothing in their own nature compelled their occurrence. Let me illustrate my meaning. We see many things taking place before our eyes. The movements of charioteers, for instance, when they guide and turn their chariots, and so on. Now, is any one of these movements compelled by any necessity? No, certainly not. There would be no exercise of skill if all movements were forced. Then, things that, as they take place, are free from any necessity in the present, must also, before they take place, be about to happen without necessity. Therefore, there must be events that are going to happen in the future that will occur perfectly free from necessity. At all events, I imagine that no one will deny that things now taking place were about to happen before they actually happened. Such things, however much foreknown, occur freely. For even as foreknowledge of things present imports no necessity into things that are taking place, so foreknowledge of the future imports none into things that are about to take place. But this, you will protest, is the very point we are disputing, whether any foreknowledge is possible of things whose occurrence is not necessary. For here you see a contradiction. If events are foreseen, their necessity follows. But if there is no necessity, they can certainly not be foreknown. You think that nothing can be grasped in knowledge unless it is certain, but if things whose occurrence is uncertain are foreknown as certain, this is the cloudy mist of opinion, not the truth of knowledge. For you believe that to hold an opinion about something contrary to reality is incompatible with sound knowledge. Now, the cause of the mistake is this. People think that all knowledge is based on an object's nature and ability to be known. But the opposite is true. What we know, we grasp not according to an object's ability to be known, but according to our ability to know. An example will make this clear. The roundness of an object is recognized in one way by sight and in another by touch. Sight sees the whole object from a distance by sending out its rays, while touch perceives its roundness little by coming near and contacting its surface and by feeling around its circumference. Humanity itself, likewise, is viewed in one way by sensation, in another by imagination, in another way again by reason, and in another by pure intelligence. Sensation assesses his shape clothed in material substance, imagination his shape alone apart from matter. Reason transcends this again, and by contemplating universals, considers the type itself, which is contained in the individual. The eye of intelligence is even more exalted, for surpassing the sphere of the universal, it will behold absolute form itself by the pure power of the mind's vision. The main point to consider is this. The higher faculty of comprehension embraces the lower, while the lower cannot rise to the higher. For sensation has no ability beyond matter, nor can imagination behold universal ideas, nor reason embrace pure form. But intelligence, looking down, as it were, from its higher standpoint, perceives both form and the individual elements that underlie it. It comprehends them in the same way as it comprehends that form itself, which could be known by no other than itself. For it perceives the universal of reason, the figure of imagination, and the matter of sensation, without employing reason, imagination, or sensation, but surveying all things, so to speak, under the aspect of pure form, by a single flash of intuition. Reason also, when it considers the universal, embraces images and sense impressions without resorting to imagination or sensation. For it is reason that has defined the universal from its conceptual point of view like this. A human being is a two-legged, rational animal. This is indeed a universal notion, yet no one is ignorant that the thing is imaginable and presentable to sensation because reason considers it not by imagination or sensation, but by means of rational conception. Imagination, too, though its ability to view and form shapes is founded on the senses, nevertheless surveys sensible objects without using sensory perception, but rather imagination. Do you see, then, how all things gain knowledge based on their own capacity, not the capacity of the objects they know? And this is not strange, for since every judgment is the act of the one judging, it is necessary that each should accomplish its task by its own, not by another's power. Song 4. A Psychological Fallacy. From the Stoics of the porch comes a doctrine sage that compares a living mind to a written page. since all knowledge comes through sense, graven by experience. As, they say, the pen, its marks speedily can trace on the smooth, unsullied white of the paper's face, so do outer things impress images on consciousness. But if truthfully the mind thus all passive lies, if no living power within its own force supplies, if it but reflect again, like a glass, things false and vain, from whence comes the faculty that perceives and knows, that in one fair ordered scheme does the world enclose, grasps each whole that sense presents, or breaks into elements, so divides and recombines, and on pathways twain now to low descends, and now upward soars again, last in inward swift review sifts between the false and true. Of these broad abilities, fitter cause would be mind's own self than marks impressed on it passively. Yet the body, through the sense, stirs the soul's intelligence. When light flashes on the eye, or sound strikes the ear, mind, aroused to due response, makes the message clear, and the mere external signs with the hidden forms combines.